Let's get started. So yes, everyone, thank you for coming. Chirantan today will be going through the third of what should be a four-part series of Mulesoft just teach backs. We had Wayne do the introductory course for Mulesoft for Boomi developers, and then we had Soumya walk us through performance from Mulesoft. And today, Chirantan's going to be talking to us a little bit about DataWeave, which is the mapping language and components in Mulesoft. So I think we're already 7 minutes into our hour, so I'm going to turn it over to Chirantan, and thank you for setting this up.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you everyone for joining. So today we'll be going through the DataWeave introduction. So quickly walking through on what we will cover today. So first of all, we'll give a quick introduction on what exactly is DataWeave, the terminology behind it. Then we'll be doing some basic transformations in XML and JSON, where I'll be showing some code snippets on how to do that. Then we'll slightly go into a little bit of more complexity, where I will show you how to handle arrays in terms of XML arrays, JSON arrays within DataWeave. And then the last section would be how to use operators and custom data types in DataWeave. So I think after we complete these 4 sections, it'll be a good overview for someone who is interested in learning more about DataWeave, or if someone wants to take a deep dive. That should be a good head start. So let's get started. So what exactly is DataWeave? It's, as Andrew correctly said, it's the transformation component within Mulesoft, which is very similar to JSON and used for transforming data. It can handle multiple data formats ranging from XML, JSON, CSV, Java, and others as well. So it's divided into 2 main sections. One is the header, and the second part is the body. The header contains the high-level information about the transformation, what exactly is the output of the transformation component, and the body contains the real code that we write, or the expression you can say, which will generate the output. So let me take you through the snippet that I have created so far. So the first example is a JSON payload that we will be transforming into XML. So this section, right, is the header part of it, and this part of the code is the body. So these are the 2 components of DataWeave. So before I dive into how to write this, for someone who does not know what payload means in Mulesoft, payload in Mulesoft is a part of Mule message structure. So Mule message structure has 3 main components. One is the header, which you call inbound and outbound properties. Then you have attachments and exceptions, and the body of the message structure is payload. So, or in Boomi terms, what we call as document, you can refer to as payload in Mulesoft. So just sort of giving a heads up on what that means before we kind of show how to write that in the DataWeave part. So taking a look at our example, it's a very basic JSON structure which has some airline details, flight code, number of seats, right? So how do you transform this into XML? First of all, you mention, okay, the output that I want is an XML. So that's the first part you have to mention. And then you have to start by writing your root object. So without a root object, an XML transformation never works. So this is going to be our root object, where flights, everything that you see beneath this will be within the flights root object. So the first section is going to be an attribute. So how do you write an attribute in DataWeave? The way to write it is using the add function. So the way is, if you write something as add function, and then your destination element airline is going to be mapped to the payload.airline. So basically the way it's going to route it is this whole thing is the payload, and then it's going to say, okay, what is payload.airline? That's going to be United. So United in the JSON object, it will be mapped to the attribute airline within the flights object. And similarly, flight code is not going to be an attribute, so that's going to be like just like payload.flight code or payload.from airport code, and so on. So this is a very basic transformation on how you can write a one-to-one mapping. Either you can write this manually, or you can also use the drag doc functionality on how you can set this up. So for example, if you go to the context section, and let's say I'm going to quickly remove, let's say, plain price. Okay, if I don't want to write that, I'm going to save it. So now you see there's no connecting line between price on the payload and price on the output. So if I just drag this out, it's going to generate it on my own. So that's how you can do it as well. So for basic transformations where it's only one-to-one mapping, you can either write it manually if you're comfortable, or if you don't want to do it, you can you can use the drag drop functionality and use that as well. Coming to the second part on how do you set this payload, right? How do you set this as an example? This is very similar to what we do as setting as profile in Boomi. One of the ways is you right click on the payload section here, and then you click on set metadata. And then I have created some metadata here, but then you can create something of your own. So you click on add, and then you can just write test example, for example. And then you have to select, okay, what's your input going to be? If it's a JSON, XML, you have other formats as well. So let's say you can just select a JSON. And after you select that, you have two options. Either you can import your JSON schema, or you can import your example. And once you do that part, you will see your respective metadata that you have selected over here. And then you can see the payload over here as well. For in this case, I've imported the example. So that's one of the ways that you can create your own metadata or profile, as we say in Boomi, and then you can write your code to kind of have the transformation ready. Now, the last part is how do you view the output? So there's a preview section in Mulesoft which allows you to view the code. So as we see, the output is XML. We have our root object flights, and as mentioned, since we're using the add function, the airline object is an attribute with the value United, and then you have other fields coming one by one beneath the flight object. So this is a very basic example of how you write a JSON to XML. Any questions so far? Okay, no questions. So yeah, this is a very basic example of how you write from JSON to XML. Now we'll move on to the second example of if you have an XML input, how do you convert that to a JSON? So I've done the exact same steps where I've created my own metadata, which is my XML example in this case. So we have a flights object with similar attribute, and then everything like a single hierarchy. Every element is within the flights object, and then I've used my output as application just JSON, so it's going to be converting this XML example into a JSON. And then I'm just creating a flat structure of, say, okay, airline is going to be my destination element, and then payload is my whole object over here. So it's going to take payload.flights, which is this section. And then since airline is an attribute, I have to mention the add function, and that's how airline is going to be mapped to an airline. When you come to flight code, since it's not an attribute, it's just an element, we can just write payload.flights.flight code. So the important thing to note here is you always have to go through the root element. So you just can't do payload.flight code. You have to do payload.flights.flight code or payload.flights.from airport code. And that's how the mapping you have to write. So if you click on preview section, you can see that it has been transformed into a JSON, very flat structure of airline, United, flight code, from airport code to airport code, departure date, and all the elements that you see here. It's a very simple one-to-one. Any questions so far?
So for a Boomi developer, usually used to writing or building mapping shapes and then having to test them, what's kind of the cool feature in this that Mulesoft allows you to do?
Yes, yes, or yes, that's one way. Or even if let's say if you don't have the whole payload, right? If you just want to test for a particular field, you can replace. Uh, for example, I'll just show you something. This is the testing, but I was just playing with the date. I was just using this date as an example, and then I wrote my this date conversion, and if I preview this, you can see the conversion as well. So you can mention the input right there itself, and then test your transformation instead of executing or rerunning the whole application and then waiting to see, okay, where does my transformation fit into this, or is it working or not working? So that's, I
Right.
think that's the cool part of it. That's a very valid point.
Yeah.
Chirantan, where
All
did
right.
you write that? Sorry, if you can show that test thing again. Where did you write the your? Oh, just on the output payload section. Okay.
Yes. So if you click on preview, you will see the so my output is application Java, so it's a Java object,
Hmm.
and then I'm converting this date with with month, year, hours, minute format into just months and date. But we'll be getting into that later. So, but I just want to show an example of you can even mention your input in the very mapping code that you're writing and then test it out.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Perfect. So the next section that we are covering is how to handle arrays. So when you come to arrays in DataWeave, there's something called map operator, which is a very important feature that you have to use when it comes to transforming arrays. So I just thought of giving an example of what exactly this operator means before diving into the code and showing how to use map operators to transform arrays. So what exactly is this operator? So the definitions from the Mulesoft documentation site says that every time you use this operator, it returns an array which is a result of applying a transformation function to each of the elements. And it is invoked with two parameters, which is the dollar and the double dollar. So I know this definition can be a little bit confusing. So I'm going to be showing you two examples how you can decipher that definition. So for now, we have a user list that I've created. It has three elements, Mike, Charles, and Andrew. And then I'm using the map operator. For now, you can ignore this part of the component. I will get to that slightly later. But when I click on preview section, what you will see is you will have this user list with reoccurring JSON objects showing you the index and the data. So as the definition says, right, that when you use the map operator, it is a result of applying the transformation function to each and every element. So that's why you are seeing that this transformation function is being applied to every element, and that's how you generate these occurrences of JSON objects. So the way the map operator is working here is it's it's going to route through Mike first. So when you come to the first element, Mike, the index is going to be 0 and the element is Mike. That's why you see index 0 data Mike. When you come to Charles, it's going to say, okay, the index is 1 and the data is Charles. That's why you see index 1, Charles as the data. And similarly, when you come to Andrew, it's the third element, but the index is 2 and then the data is Andrew. So what exactly we are using these two components are dollar denotes the data within that payload and double dollar is used to denote index. So that's how you use a map operator for a list to kind of convert this list into an array of multiple occurring objects. Any questions so far?
So if you just replace index with something else, it will show in the output as XYZ, and then the value will still be the value of the index, right?
Yeah. So if I write index 1, you'll see index 1.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's go into a better example of map operator by really taking an example of a JSON array that I have prepared. So this object that you see, right, we have the airline object occurring multiple times. One is for United Airlines and then second one is Delta. So the way I have written my map operator is I have defined a root object flights. I'm saying, okay, use the payload object, which is going to be taking whole JSON object, and then use the map operator. And then beneath that, I have a curly braces, and I have defined another object called flight. Now what it's going to do is within flight, it's going to take every occurrence of airline and map it to airline, and every occurrence of flight code and map it to flight code. So when the map operator iterates the first occurrence, it's going to map United to airline, and then it will map ER38 SD to flight code, and similarly other elements. And then when it goes to the second occurrence of the array, it's going to be mapping Delta to airline, and then CLA to from airport code. So that's how I'm making this map operator iterate through the whole payload by saying, okay, use the whole payload and map through everything, and then use flights as my root object, and then I want another object called flight, which will be repeating for every occurrence of this portion of the JSON. When I go into the preview section, you will see flights as my root object, as mentioned here, and then I have this flight object, which is going to be occurring multiple times because it is within the map operator. Then you have airline, United, flight code, and all the details of the first occurrence. And then again, you'll see an occurrence of the flight object with Delta and other details from the source object. So this is something that I wanted to show on how exactly to use a map operator before we dive into some more complex scenarios of how to convert an array of JSON into an XML and array of XML into JSON. Any questions so far? Okay, no questions, no problem. My next section is when we are writing expressions for an XML output, specifically using map operator, there are some modifications that we have to make. And as you might be seeing here, is we have the map operator followed by all the objects. If at all we are writing an expression for the XML output, and if your input is either JSON or Java, the key is to wrap your map operation within a parenthesis preceded by a curly braces, where your defining object is going to be the curly braces, and then your parenthesis is going to be transforming each element into a key value pair within an array. So that is something that is really important when you are writing an XML output, specifically using the map operator. So let's take this example. I have taken the exact same example which I demonstrated a bit earlier. Same airline occurring multiple times, but this time we are transforming that into XML. So as you might be seeing, my map operator is being wrapped up into curly braces and a parenthesis as mentioned over here. So that is exactly what we'll be doing to convert this JSON into an array of XML. And then within that, I have my flights as my root object, and then my reference is my payload, which is going to be the whole message structure. And then within my payload, I'm creating another flight object, which is going to be a repeatable element. And then I'll be accessing every element of airline and flight code and other elements by using the dollar signature, which is going to be going through every occurrence one by one. When I go to the previous section, you see flights as your root. You see flight object within that root, and you have your airline, flight code, departure date, and similarly you have your second occurrence, flight within that. So that's how you convert an array of JSON into an array of XML. Any questions so far?
No?
Okay. Our next example is going to be, okay, if you have an input as an XML, which is an array, how do you convert that into an array of JSON? So let me quickly give you an overview of what my XML object looks like. So this is going to be a flight's root object, and within that you have multiple occurrences of flight object. So you have this as occurrence 1, and then you have flight occurrence 2, then you have another occurrence. But before that as well, you also have an airline history object under the flights object. That's a slight modification that I have made, which I'll explain why I've done that. So when I am converting this whole payload into a JSON object, right? I am saying, okay, for my flights as my root object, the path that I want to convert is within my payload. I only want to convert the flight object, this object, and all the occurring flight objects as well. So the way I have written this mapping function is it's saying, okay, map everything to the root flights object using the whole payload dot flights. So it's going to start from here. So payload dot flights, which is this section, and then it's saying, okay, map all occurrences of flight object. So it's going to take the first one, the second one, third one, but since there's one more element called airline history within the flights object, I have excluded that. So this will make sure that your output object doesn't have the airline history. So that's why I had to write, okay, traverse everything from payload to flights and then all occurrences of flight. That's why I've included a star here. So it's going to exclude just the airline history but include everything else. And then once I have my map operator, then I'm saying, okay, map airline to airline, flight code to flight code, airport code to airport code, departure date to departure date. And then I go to the previous section. I see flights, I see airline, but you see there is no airline history. So that's been excluded. So let's say if at all we want to include that, right? Then the way to do that is just remove this part. So now I'm saying traverse from payload flights. So it's going to take the whole route and map everything from airline to airline, flight code to flight code, airport code to airport code, and others. And now if you go all the way to the bottom, you will see the airline history component as well. So you will see that delta is mapped from airline to airline, and you'll see total seats 50,000. The reason why you are seeing these elements as null, because there is no flight code or there is no from airport code in the airline history. That's why you're seeing those as null. But any other fields which are mapping with the code, so you have airline and total seats which are also present in the airline history, they are visible. So that's how you can play with different XML hierarchies if you want to convert that within an array into an array of JSON. I'm going to be putting back my code and resolving it to only flight. So now you see that airline history is gone. Yeah, I just want to take a quick stop here and take any suggestions, any questions. If at all there is something that you're not following, or if you want me to repeat anything, do let me know, please. I think, can I proceed to the next section?
Yeah, good on my end.
Okay. Wayne, just want to get a quick suggestion. Do you think this is going well, or anything that I need to include in specifically before I go into the operator section?
I think it's going great, Chirantan. It's very clear, and I'm enjoying it.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. So I think this section where we'll be covering the operators. I think this is going to be the most interesting section where we will get to demonstrate the robustness of DataWeave in comparison to how you can write if else statements, how you can kind of modify dates and modify fields and elements and other things for which we have to write multiple map functions or custom scripts within Boomi. So this is my favorite section, which I want to demonstrate, where we'll be showing different operators on how you can use them using DataWeave and write concise code and still get the job done. This example, I am using the very same example of flights where I have my flights as root object followed by multiple repeating flight elements. And I am traversing through just the flight object. So it's going to be payload.flights and all occurrences of flight. And I'm mapping everything beneath that. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, map airline to airline, but convert everything into uppercase. So then an operator called upper in DataWeave. So when you use that, your input field is going to be converted into uppercase. So let's see how that looks. You see you have United and Delta, but that comes as uppercase. So that's kind of example that I want to demonstrate on how you can convert something from lowercase to uppercase. Now the second example that I want to give is how do you write if-else statements within DataWeave. So there's a field called status. So the way you can write your if-else statements is I'm saying that, okay, if your empty seats element within your source fits less than 15, then the message that you will be seeing on the output would be only few tickets available. And if it's greater than 15, then you will see tickets available. So in this case, you see that the empty seats are 24. That's why you see status as tickets available. And in this case, your empty seats are 10. So you see, hey, only few tickets available. So that's an example of how you write your if-else statements. You can even include multiple conditions within your if-else statements by using AND operators or operators. You can make it further verbose and robust as well. But I just included one condition just to demonstrate how to include that of writing an if-else statement. Now, my third example is how do you modify dates. So the dates that I have included in my input format is in YYYY/MM/DD. So the way I have modified them is using this format. So the way to write any date transformation within DataWeave is, first of all, you have to mention the current format followed by the format that you want to see. The only exception to that is if your input date is in YYYY-MM-DD format, then you can get around without writing your source date format. Otherwise, if it's any other format, then you have to mention that. So that's what I'm saying is departure date from the input is mapped to departure date from output, where first I'm specifying my source format, which is what you see over here. And then I'm converting into this format, which is going to be saying, okay, the month will be a 3-letter word followed by date followed by year. So you see that 2016 July 1st would look something like this. And then you have same for August, which is going to be one of these, this one. 2016-0801 would look like August 1st, 2016. It's because I have mentioned this format. So you're free to mention any other format that you want and play with it, but this is an example of how you kind of convert dates within DataWeave. The third example that I want to use is how do you format numbers? So the price section within my source has 3 decimals. Now I don't want 3 decimals to be in my output, so I want only two decimals. The way I'm converting that is I'm saying, hey, format my price element as a number and then as a string, but only format to 2 decimal sections. So this is the format that you use, kind of play with it for 2 decimal sections. The reason why I've used 3 letters over here is because all my inputs are 3 letters only, 3 numbers. And then I want up to 2 decimals, so I've used 0, 0. So that's why you would, if there's an input which says 240, 244, you'll only see 240.24 and the 4 is excluded because this format doesn't take care of it. Similarly, if you want only 1 decimal, you would see 240.2 followed by 280.1. Bring that back again. Now there are some other operators that I have used. One is the filter operator. I'm saying that, okay, I don't want to see any payload if the empty seats element is not equal to 0. So exclude all of that. So if I remove this field, you would see some objects in the output which has empty seats as 0. I'm just taking that out. And now you see that you have slightly more elements, and you see specifically this element which you have empty seats as 0. So this is a cool way where you can use one operator and just filter out data from your source and still make it work. There's another element or an operator that I have used to kind of clear out duplicates. So if you have duplicates within your source data, how do you wipe that out from your destination payload? So there's an operator called distinct by. If you use that, then it will get rid of all your duplicate data based on the criteria that you have to use. So in this case, I'm using the dollar, which is going to be using the whole data. So for example, if I remove this section, if I save it, now you see object 1 and object 2, they are exactly the same. So the absence of distinct by operator will give you 2 duplicates, but if I include that, one of them is gone. So that's a cool way, in my opinion, where you can use distinct by operator and get rid of duplicates. For which I think we'll have to write lots of custom code within Boomi, but DataWeave presents you an opportunity with operators where you can just include few keywords and get the job done. Then the other operator that I have used is order by, where I'm saying, okay, order by the whole payload by price. So you are seeing in ascending order. So you see the first price is 199, then 240, and 280. Unfortunately, like we have in SQL where you can write DSC and stuff like that, you don't have that in DataWeave. But if you want to do it in descending order, you just have to include a hyphen. And now you see the whole payload is sorted as per descending order. 280 as the first price, followed by 240, followed by 199. So these are some examples on how you can transform dates, how you use if-else statements, how to use operators, filtering data, and so on. I think there are so many other operators which I did not include, but these are some of the transformations using operators that I wanted to show on how it can be done. Any questions so far?
Hey, Chirantan, I have a question not exactly related to the operators and all, but in Mule 4 they have like 2.0 version of DW. So do you have any idea like how second version is different than the like DataWeave 1 first version?
I have not investigated so much in Mule 4 to be honest, so I really do not know that.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, no issues.
But from what I know a little bit, DataWeave 2.0 allows you to import some Java classes along with the existing functionality of 1.0. So I think it's definitely backward compatible.
Okay.
It's not like any operators that are working in DataWeave 1.0 as a part of Mule 3 may not work. I doubt it. I'll still have to confirm that, but I don't think. I do think these operators should work in 2.0 as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't answer much about that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Now, the next section we will be looking into how do you define custom data types. So just going back to the same example, right? Let's say you have this payload where you're constantly modifying dates and constantly writing different formats. But if at all you have a payload where you want this to be reusable, how do you make that happen in DataWeave? So the answer to that is you have to define custom data types. And the way to do that is just include your type and the format that you want to include. So in this case, I have defined three types. One is the currency, destination format, and source format. And my currency data type is nothing but a string that will format data up to 2 decimals. And my destination format is a data type which is going to be formatting date into month in 3 letters, followed by date, followed by day, followed by year. And then my source format is going to be the format that I'll be seeing in my payload. So if you take the very same example in the operator section, the way you would write this for date is, okay, take the departure date as source format. So when I say as source format, it's going to be referring to this portion, and then convert that into destination format. So it's going to be taking my destination format. Similarly, when I want to modify my price element and format it into 2 decimals, I have included the reference currency. So it's going to be referring to this string format up to 2 decimals, and then all my other operators are still the same. So these are a few ways where you can define your data types and refer them in your DataWeave code and make it reusable. So you still see the same example. This is a Java object, so you will see it slightly differently. But if you see, my price is modified up to 2 decimals, and my date is always is still in the same format as this one. So this is an example of how you can create your own data type and reuse them in the code and kind of be efficient and a little bit lazy.
So Chirantan, this one, this declaring of a new custom data type, so this has to be in the DataWeave file that we are doing it, or it can import from some other common DataWeave file. For example, if we want to use a common date format across all projects, so can we import it from a common location in the DataWeave file or something?
You can, yes, you have the ability to import DataWeave files. So I'll show you that as well. So what you could do is, if at all you have a project where you have defined some custom data types, right? And then the way to store that in a file is you have to click on this pen section and then write that to a file. So let's say if I write custom DW, once you write that, if you go within the project, if you go to source main resources, now you see custom DWL, that's where your data will be transferred. So if you take that source file and you can move this to any other project where you just have to copy this into the main resources, and then you can start referring it, if that answers your question.
Yeah, and how do you refer it? Say if there's another database file where I need to refer this value, so is that import statement or what is the syntax? I just wondering.
No, you would have to move them. You would have to move this file within the source main resources folder of your project, and then use it.
Okay, so I have to keep a copy in all the projects.
Yeah. It's you. There's I don't know if Mulesoft has ability to create some reference objects, reference projects, but I don't know if that extends to DataWeave. That only extends to connectors, if I'm not wrong. So if you have a common HTTP connection or a common JMS connection, you can create reference projects where you can reference that, but I don't think that extends to DataWeave.
Okay, yeah, no problems.
Andrew, that's all from my side. I think I have covered everything that I needed to cover. The last thing that I want to say is, if at all anyone is interested in kind of digging more into DataWeave, you have the DataWeave introduction video for someone who's trying to do it for the first time. If you need some additional documentation, this is a great link which has lots of information on DataWeave. So these are some of the links that one can refer if they want to take a deeper dive into it. But in terms of my presentation, I think I'm done. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, or you can ping me or ask me here itself or send me an email.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Chirantan. It was
Any
very
questions from
informative.
anyone else?
Thank you, Chirantan.
Yeah.
Anytime.
I'm good.
Thank you, Chirantan.
Chirantan, you're going to share the PPT, especially the links.
Yes, I will be posting the DataWeave project along with the presentation to SharePoint site, and then you guys can take a look at it.
And Derek, I saw your comment. I'm going to post to the learning channel with the SharePoint site where the Mule learning educational information lives. And I'm uploading these videos to actually a YouTube channel. SharePoint was giving me some trouble, so I'll have a document with a link to all of those in there as well. But yeah, thank you, Chirantan, for being generous with your time and your experience. And there's no more questions. We'll give everybody a few minutes back.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.